Keynote, which looks at partnerships for job creation, is what our next speaker is going to be speaking about. Nicola Galombik is probably one of the people that we're all very familiar with in this room. She's an executive director at Yellowwoods Holding. She really leads the group's efforts in terms of driving their positive social and environmental impact that they're seeking to make, and seeking to do that through a portfolio of various businesses. And she also manages their innovative social financing and grant-making efforts. It's my absolute pleasure, Nicola, to invite you onto the stage. Let's give her a round of applause. And the final comment as Nicola takes to the podium is to remind you to please post your questions and comments, and time permitting, I'll be able to put these to Nicola. Over to you, Nicola.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Good morning, everybody. I think, and thank you to Judy for having set up some of the issues, but I did want to spend a bit of time making sure we all somehow in the room together understand the problem we're trying to solve. Because I think that the solutions that we need collectively are bigger than we are currently doing. They're bigger and more urgent than the way we're currently doing things. They require a new way. They require us to do new things, to do them differently, and most importantly, to do them together. And we can only really think about what those things are and how we're going to do them with our young people in mind, if we understand the problem. So I want to just talk about the problem of youth employment in South Africa. First, there are 8 million, Judy mentioned the 15 to 24-year-olds. There are 8 million currently not in employment, education, and training. Now, PwC, in a recent piece of work that they did for our business-government partnership on tackling unemployment, estimates that our growth rate needs to get to 5% over the next few years for us to produce 2.5 million jobs by 2030. In 2023, Stats SA says our growth rate in that year was 0.6%. Okay. So it's a really important starting point. It is impossible to create sustainable jobs without a growing economy. I mean, that just has to be said, understood, and accepted. That everything else I'm going to say today does not detract from this fact, that if we do not do what needs to be done and deal with the binding constraints to get our economy growing again, and for businesses to be investing and using their value chains to create jobs, not their CSI, their value chains is where we create jobs, right? So this economy needs to be growing. But I'm going to come back to the things that are possible in this context, but I'm still on understanding the problem. So if you understand the problem from a young person's perspective, we heard about learners at schools that Telkom is working with, and many, I think, businesses in this room support efforts in education. Of course, that is important, but that is a long game. And if you look at the actual numbers, what we're doing is just, it's wholly insufficient and wholly ineffective unless we're going to do things differently. So every year, about 1 million young people enter this labor market. Some at matric, some fall out earlier, some, I'll come back to that one, and some are leaving higher education at various moments. Of them, 60% are NEET. They've joined the NEET pool, the not in education, training or education or employment by the end of the first year. 20% find formal sector employment, and another 20% pursue further education. Okay, so that's labor market entrance story. In South Africa, if you are unemployed by the time you're 30, you're likely to be long-term unemployed for the rest of your life. Okay. So it's really important for us to understand the scale and the urgency that we as businesses and our social, economic, and development and business activities need to solve for. We are a very big player in the market. We are a very big player in society, and our responses need to be proportional to the scale of the problem and the urgency of the problem. So just continuing a few more slides on the problem, and then I'm going to talk about our opportunity zones. So if we look at the pool of young people that start in grade 1, we have cohorts in South Africa of about 1 million people per age group, right? There are 1 million 2-year-olds, 1 million 3-year-olds, 1 million 4-year-olds. So let's say 1 million people start grade 1. Only 3 out of those 5 actually complete matric, right? So 38%, I think it is, of school leavers are leaving without a matric. And then of the ones who complete matric, 1/3 take maths as a core subject, right? And I mention this because you'd be amazed how many employers, when they're recruiting young people, would say that their criteria is that you took maths at school, right? I just want you to understand how small a pool of our young people that actually is talking to, right? So only 1/3 of the people that finish matric do maths, and only 1 out of 5 of those actually get more than 50% for maths when they matriculate. So when we are using mathematics as our only way of judging a young person's potential, no matter what we're doing in the schooling system, it's not working well enough and fast enough to solve the problem for a current group of school leavers, right? They need a different way of assessing their potential than their mathematics attainment, or any attainment for that matter. And they need a different way of us thinking about how they pathway from learning to earning, right? We cannot be thinking in our traditional ways. That is not the world we are dealing with, right? It doesn't conform to any of our fantasies of what we think of as the pathway from learning to earning. So I like to tell the story of the elephant and the mouse because all of this can feel quite overwhelming, right? This sounds like an elephant, and it is the question of how do we move this elephant, right? And just the quick version of that story is that the elephant is standing on the roof of the mouse's house, the opening to the mouse's house, and her babies are inside. So she urgently needs to move the whole elephant. And she's quite a clever mouse, and she knows that eating the elephant a piece at a time is not the solution, right? So what she does is she pulls the lion's tail. The lion gives a huge roar, and the elephant moves. So I'm going to talk about a few things that are happening in our context, which I consider to be examples of pulling the lion's tail, the big things, the things that are going to move the dial, right? And they're things that require us to redirect some of our spending, redirect some of our efforts towards a few things that have the potential to really scale, to really make a dial-moving impact on this huge and urgent problem that we have. So the first is that we have to rethink this pathways question, how young people transition from learning to earning and how we're judging what they have the potential to do, right? Or even what they should be doing to earn a living and participate in the economy. And I am super excited about where we have got to through the efforts of many partners in the private sector, government, the work of the Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator in partnership with all of these partners have built something called the National Pathway Management Network, right? And it is a pathway management platform for 4 million young people who are currently on it, actively engaged on this platform, who are active work seekers by the QLSF definition. They are people, young people, trying to say, what is my next move that brings me closer to an earning opportunity? Whether that earning opportunity is with an employer or in someone's, gig work value chain or running a small business in my community or even doing community service, what is my next move and what am I capable of? And the really good news story, and this is a really important good news story, is Harambee a while back developed entirely new assessment tools for assessing the potential of young people that didn't take into account their education attainment, but tried to understand their actual cognitive capability, their fluid intelligence, their ability to solve problems, their ability to complete patterns, spot the 21st century skills, right? How well did they do on those? Well, the very good news is 20% of the young people in that network, in the SA Youth Network, meet or exceed the expectations of the requirements of that fluid intelligence, problem-solving capability and cognitive capability that employers are looking for or that the economy needs. But it has no correlation to their qualifications. The education they received, the poor teachers they had, what subjects they took, it was all a mismatch to what they're actually capable of. Right. Now, this is really important because it is a pool of potential, but we need to unlock this pool of potential, right? And we need to think completely differently about how we now enable this high potential group of young people, despite whatever problems they had in their education, to transition into the growing areas of this economy. So this is the good news story about the growing areas of the economy, is not everywhere is not growing in the economy. There are sunrise sectors in this economy. The global business services sector in South Africa has grown compound over 20% annually for the last 5 to 6 years. We are growing jobs in this sector. They're really great jobs for young people. We've been growing them at a really rapid rate. The green economy and our energy transition is spawning a whole lot of new potential job opportunities, right? The digital sector that Judy spoke about is the obvious one, and I'm going to spend a bit more time on the digital one because it's just such an obvious slam dunk for us, actually, and I'll show you why. So we have to focus on where there is live opportunity, not focus just because our business is in, whatever. I might be in textile manufacturing. That's fantastic if I'm growing GDP through that, but it's not a huge job creator, or it is. But really think hard about where the jobs are going to be created and where to focus our effort. Now, this is an interesting one. It's the mismatch between the number of entry-level roles, just entry-level, okay? Entry-level roles in this economy 2 years ago, vacancies for digital entry-level roles, 40,000. 20,000 is the number of candidates who complete a digital qualification, the throughput rate of our entire system. This includes all our universities, our TVETs, all private sector programs, all the lovely programs we were hearing about, all of it adds up to this 20,000 a year. So even just in relation to our own jobs, we have a mismatch and we're offshoring these jobs, right? And we could be growing these jobs as our economy grows with these digital skills, and we could be actually bringing global business service sector jobs here. But we have to deal with this supply side problem. Now, we always say we need more money. Well, we kind of need more money spent on the right things. So this number is the amount that South Africa, public, private, both, spend on post-school education and training every year. Approximately, it's actually from a few years ago, don't think it's changed that much, analysis by Andrew Donaldson at the Treasury at the time. That is a big number. That is over and above what we spend on the education system, the basic education system. So this is our post-school education and training budget, right? Our problem is not the money. Our problem is the way we are, our funnel, the conversion rate and the completion rate of our young people, right? So we need to think of new skilling solutions that build on the potential of our young people, find them where they are and what they're already good at and what they already know, bridge them quickly, effectively, into jobs that this economy actually has and with the skills and the competence that this economy actually needs. And that requires really changing how our skill system works. If you're sitting at CETA meetings, or you're representing your business at CETA meetings or in skills development forums, if we're not changing the rules of the game about what gets accredited, how much we can spend on non-accredited training, how much we can do, not driven by BEE scorecards, but driven by the needs of the economy and the needs of the young people. Then there's another whole opportunity area, which is that no matter how much and you saw from the PwC figures I presented at the beginning, even if we do grow the economy, the formal sector will only produce so many new jobs. The formal sector is being disrupted, it's being digitized, there's always a drive towards efficiency. So we will not grow the jobs in the formal sector. South Africa's informal sector is too small. It's much smaller than similar middle-income countries. And so what we need to do, and this is from Haroon Bharat at UCT, is we need to double. The 10% is the size of our informal economy. 50% is the number of people that find work in formal wage labor. And 40% is our unemployment, right? Now, what we need to do is reduce our unemployment by growing the informal and township economy, right? So that people are finding work by starting enterprises, working in other small enterprises, and selling their services locally to people in their communities, but also selling their services into corporate value chains. Now, that all sounds obvious, but despite years and years and years of SED and supplier development, somehow we have not cracked, we've not moved the needle here sufficiently, okay? And so there are exciting solutions available that are starting to emerge. Some of them lie in the way that financial services solutions are working. Somebody yesterday at the Futures Trust called it democratizing debt, right? Is what kind of debt and investment is available to these businesses. For those businesses in the room who could either be doing that through your procurement value chains or through your financial services, depending on what kind of business you are. There are exciting innovations around platforms, digital and tech platforms that are helping to aggregate markets. And they need more investment. We need to take more risk on these kinds of solutions. Let's call it Uberizing parts of the informal economy, or enabling informal economy traders. Uber drivers, I often used to say, there was somebody who could drive and smile, and then Uber came and it turned a driver into a business. And that is a thing, right? Are there more examples of that, right? I certainly see it in early childhood development. I see it in retail and food businesses. So there's a whole space of opportunity here. And it mostly has to integrate into corporate value chains, or it has to be enabled through new forms of investment and enablement in township economies. Again, this is not new. The question is, how do we do more of this, and how do we do it better? Because our success is going to come from execution together, not from brand new ideas that no one has thought of. Judy mentioned this, is my last sort of fact slide, which is a key enabler to that is access to broadband internet. And I do think it's really important that we understand how rapidly the digital divide is playing out in our economy. Only 3 out of 100 South Africans have a broadband internet contract. So if you are amongst those 3, consider yourselves lucky. Everything you imagine is possible on a smartphone is not possible on a smartphone. People might have smartphones, but they can't do anything with them except go on Facebook, right? So it's a really important mismatch to understand that we have to roll out broadband access cheaply. Somebody in the Telkom Foundation was talking about for free, like cheaply would be a good start, right? But access to broadband internet. So I've talked about the 4 solution sets that I think we've recently started a business government partnership to tackle unemployment, and we've really organized it into these 4 areas that I think I've been pointing to. There's unlocking actual jobs. That is about growing the economy or about focusing on sunrise sectors. If you're building a call center, build it in a township. If you're, find ways to think about how we invest in sectors and build sectors that grow jobs. The second is pathway management. And I think that the SA Youth Pathway Management Network is a network for the whole country. It's a new piece of the labor market architecture. It means that as employers recruit, or you want to start, invest in small businesses, use the pool of young people who are in the SA Youth Network, because you know that you're then feeding an inclusive economy when you do so. The third is demand-led skilling. I've used the digital example, but there are others in the green economy and elsewhere. And the fourth is enable people to self-employ, right, in enterprise. But I do want to stress, the IMF said a while back, and I genuinely believe it to be true, it's very hard to start a business if you've never worked. So this pathway idea is really important. I need to work. Anything, work on something. I gain so much when I work, and even if it is for 1 year, I gain a lot when I work. I learn when I work. I don't learn at school very much, unfortunately, but I do learn when I work. So those are the 4 solution areas, and the how is about, we have to focus on these in a big way, and we need to do it. People have talked about doing it together, but it needs to be organized collaboration. It's not just turn up and share experience at a thinking process. It's saying, can we organize in our industry associations? Can we organize in a value chain that we're working in? Can we work with both our competitors and our partners to see how we can do more by organizing ourselves properly and thinking about moving an elephant, not about just being a proud, happy little mouse, right? And I don't mean that pejoratively, but it is sometimes the thinking that has to shift, right? We have to be a small part of changing a big thing, rather than doing something small that's shiny, but it actually isn't moving the big thing, right? And that, I think, is an important shift in our thinking that is needed. And so I'm going to end there and say there are exciting national initiatives. There's the SA Youth platform that everybody can have access to, use as a recruitment platform, become part of, get the NGOs to join. There is a Collective X initiative on digital skills to try and literally 5x the national output of digital skills over the next 5 to 10 years, right? We have to get from 20,000 a year to 150,000 a year. And we can do that. We have all the ingredients that we need. It requires collective, coordinated effort. So I am encouraging you to participate in the collective efforts in the Business Government Initiative, and also in your industry associations or anywhere or the ecosystems you work in, to find solutions that tackle the elephant, move the elephant, and let's all be clever mice together. Thanks.
Nicola, I'm going to ask you to stay on stage with me just for 2 minutes, just to give you an opportunity to maybe respond. You can take a seat in the center to respond to maybe 1 or 2 of the questions that have come through on our app. And thank you for some very useful analogy. And I think I want to be part of the clever mice from here on. And I'll never think about tugging the lion's tail differently from here on. But here's a question from Jacques. And Jacques is saying, have we got it right in terms of when we pitch career guidance? Mm-hmm. And in particular, he says, to ensure that learners don't study outside of their fluid intelligence. Mm-hmm. When is that critical window mm-hmm. to have that exposure and conversation?
Mm-hmm. So I think there's no doubt that it would be really, really helpful to have better tools to enable young people to make good choices at the time when they're choosing subjects. Yeah. But I think we need to be really realistic when we answer these kinds of questions. Firstly, what I can say, I'm really interested in being an astronaut, right? And my school only has like one math teacher.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of contextual reality that young people have to filter as they make choices. So I wouldn't want to kind of place the burden or kind of create an oversimplistic idea of what we mean by career guidance. Career guidance is, how do I know about myself? Now, the SA Youth platform, I think, has incredible tools, and I'm sure many others in the room have tools for young people to assess their own potential.
Right.
And that's a really important thing to do, and the more the tech enables that, the better. But they then have to match what is realistically available to them, right? And then we have to keep putting opportunities in front of them. And it doesn't end at any moment.
Yeah.
It can be whenever, is what I'm going to say. You know, each of us might have that moment in our lives where someone said something or someone gave me something that helped me find my path. So I don't think we should be oversimplistic about it. I think we should say, give young people as many chances as possible to see things that they haven't seen, to find out about themselves, and then to accept that their choices are limited, because that's part of what they have to grapple with, right? Is that, you know, if, I have to then say, well, you know, these are the jobs that are available. They're not the jobs I was hoping for, but these are the ones that are available. So I think it's an ongoing journey, and I think what we call pathway management, pathway support, is what young people need.
There was quite a lot of reaction to a number of things that you said. Maybe I'll highlight two and then I'll ask you a question about one. The one being beyond the age of 30, the likelihood is that you're not going to be employed. And there was almost a visceral reaction in the room to that as well. But the other, the idea that we should actually be trying to drive employment in the informal sector. So let me then put this question to Paul, who then latched on to that. And Paul says, if we are to increase the uptake of informal employment, how do we strike the balance between ensuring that people are getting a decent wage in line with human rights and all of that, but at the same time not crippling an otherwise informal small enterprise that is just trying to survive?
So, I mean, I think if you put a livelihoods lens on this, rather than a wage, you see, if you're in wage labor, the labor law applies to you, right? If you're in an informal hustle economy, you're an enterprising micro-entrepreneur, even if you're just a single individual. You're like what we used to call under the Companies Act a sort of sole proprietor, right? And you can decide what's enough revenue, right? Or and how that relates to your costs, okay? And I think empowering people to make those kinds of judgments is really important if we're going to grow the informal economy. So let me give you an example from early childhood development, which I happen to know quite well. So in early childhood development, I mean, we have tens of thousands of unregistered practitioners who are performing in a really important public service. They're actually delivering, I mean, we started something called the Smart Start Network. We know what that is. There's 10,000 Smart Starters, many of whom are micro-entrepreneurs. I think their average net income is probably 1,500 net of their costs. Okay. But for those women, that's actually a really good income. Why? Because they're at home with their child, so they don't have childcare costs, right? They're combining their food purchasing between their business and their household. They don't have transport costs to work. Now, if you take an average retail salary, which is a minimum wage salary, okay, which is where a lot of young people are formal sector employed, is in retail, okay, all kinds of retail, FMCG, financial services, agents, blah, blah, all those forms of retail. If you're earning that minimum wage, but you have to travel to work, you live in Diepsloot. To get to the city is 160 Rand in a taxi, right? So a huge part of your portion of your salary goes on transport. A huge portion of your salary goes on clothes. Now, I'm only saying that it's really important that we are evidence-based, empathetic, and realistic about the choices people might make that may be very rational choices about what is enough for them to earn. And that we enable an economy where people are empowered to make those decisions, right? That's different from an employer is exploiting somebody. I'm not talking about that, right? That's a whole nother matter. Okay, I'm not, but people self-employing, it's really, there's a huge dignity in work, and there's a huge value in having, there's so much associated with being an ECD practitioner that's not just about that income. But anyway, that income is actually really meaningful in that household.
Nicola, it's just so sad that's all we have time for. Can we give Nicola a big round of applause, please? Nicola, thank you so much. And thank you for your questions. I've noted them, and it was such a riveting combination of